Hi, my name is Jesper Hatt. I've been working with clear aligners since 2007. In this short video, I will show you the different tools that I've been using when I performed IPR. I will show you the advantages and disadvantages related to the different tools that I've tried out. Here I've been lining up some of the tools I've been using: a metal disc, a 0.2mm burr, a intensive tip, and a dentatus tip. Both of these tips are for a Profane or EVA handpiece. I have a composite model which I've been using previously to demonstrate how we bond attachments or engages to the teeth. And I have a measuring device that we previously used to control the amount of IPR that we had created between the teeth once we had used some of these instruments. Now, back in 2007 when we started out, IPR wasn't that well known, so we would usually start with a metal strip like this. If you have ever tried to create 0.5mm of IPR with a metal strip or with Soflex discs, you will know it takes hours to create 0.5mm of space between, let's say, 6 teeth. What we did instead was we would start out using the metal strip, just go between the teeth once, just to create enough space for some of the other tips to go between the teeth. We tried out the metal discs. There are several challenges related to this. First of all, you will know if you just cut the tongue or the lips, you just have to touch them with these instruments and you will have blood all over the place. You will have to be very, very careful about the angulation of the tip, because these metal discs will cut through anything. So the metal discs, I would just leave them out. As we figured out that the metal discs weren't the best option, we started to use a 0.2mm burr for the high-speed angle piece. So with a 0.2mm tip, it's a lot easier to control how you go between the teeth. But as everyone who has ever tried to polish some sort of composite with such a small tip will know that it's really, really difficult to control exactly what you shape with these kind of tips. So here we have the intensive tip. As you can see, it has a polishing area here. It's a diamond covered. It's not completely covered. The tips from intensive and from dentatus both require a special handpiece like this. The handpiece here, the Profane handpiece, will move the IPR tip back and forth with 2.5mm of distance. The reason it's important that you don't have a tip that moves further is that if you touch the soft tissue, not just pressing down, but if you just touch the soft tissue gently, you will not experience any kind of bleeding. So that's another great advantage of these systems. The reason I don't really like the intensive tips is twofold. First of all, they're not calibrated in a way that matches the amount of IPR you would perform according to your aligner plan. So usually in a clear aligner treatment plan, you would need 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, or 0.5mm of IPR. The tips from intensive are calibrated, but in an odd way compared to the aligner systems. So to me, it doesn't really make sense, because that way I will still have to rely on my measuring devices, and I would still have to consider which of the tooth should I shape extra, and it's out of my control. So that's why I don't really like them, first of all. Secondly, the tips are made of a material, I don't know if you can see it, but it's one piece of metal where this part is actually just the metal being bent around itself, creating the part that goes into the handpiece. Now, The reason this is important is that this part here tends to bend and break when you put the tip into the handpiece and remove it again. So if you're not very careful with the insertion and the removal of these tips, they tend to bend and break. And as a third thing, I find the way the diamond covers the tip doesn't really match my preference, but it might just be my preference. And it gives you the idea that having a small size that is diamond covered, that you are more in control of where you do the exact enamel removal. But in reality, it's really, really difficult to control when you are working in the mouth of the patient. So in reality, I would rather have a tip with a big surface that is diamond covered, because that way I can just go below the contact point all the way to the gingiva and be sure that everything is just shaped in the way that I want it to be. Which brings me to the last system, which is the tips from Dentados. The Dentados tips also fit the Profane handpiece. They are made in a sort of more sturdy material or metal, so it doesn't bend or break the same way as the intensive tips. There's some sort of extra stability in the way that the plastic here covers it, and in the end there are two metal parts that kind of hold on to the tip, so when you have it in the free flow system, it is kind of being grabbed better by the Profane angle piece. Now, as you can see in the free floating system, it really is free floating. So here it will tend to follow the shape of the teeth. If you prefer it, you can also lock it into a fixed position. So here it's totally fixed. Now this is a 0.4 millimeter tip. As you might recognize, you have the different sizes that are calibrated. So you have 0.1 millimeter, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5 millimeters, which means you will always start with the 0.1 millimeter, go up to 0.2, 0.3, and so forth until you have the amount of IPR that you desire. As you can see, the tips are color-coded, so the color corresponds to the amount of IPR that is indicated here. There are two different types of design of the tips. You can see 0.1 and 0.2 millimeter have this metal frame out here. This metal frame is thicker than the actual diamond covered part. And that is because 0.1 and 0.2 millimeters of metal thickness is really, really thin. Now, I mentioned this because it's important that it is this part that goes between the teeth, like this. If you do it the opposite way, this supporting part will go between the teeth first, and that is actually 0.3 or 0.4 millimeters thick. So remember always to position it like this. That is for the first two tips here. So we always start with the 0.1 millimeter, then we go to 0.2 and so forth until we have the amount of IPR we need. 0.3, 4, and 5 has a different design, and that is because the metal has a thickness which enables us to avoid the support structure here. So here we have a different design. Here you will just see how this part goes between the teeth like this. Now, as I mentioned, the system is calibrated to the aligner systems. So let's say you need to create 0.3 millimeters of IPR. You simply start with a polishing strip like this, a metal strip. You simply go between the teeth once, just to create enough space for your 0.1 millimeter tip to go between the teeth. You start by performing the IPR between the teeth, Then you move to 0.2 millimeters. Then you go to 0.3. And if it is 0.3 millimeters of IPR you need, you simply stop here. I hope that this video has given you some inspiration in regards to what kind of IPR system would suit your needs the best. If I were to recommend you anything, it would be to at least try out both systems, the Dentatus IPR and the Intensive IPR system, and figure out what system suits your needs the best. I prefer these over the other systems. These systems are much more predictable to work with compared to a burr, a rotating metal or plastic disc, or whatever else you come up with.